John, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
We've got a bunch of questions from parents about TEKNON, so I'm going to get right to it. Okay, first question is around dietary considerations and whether parents should be putting their children on any specific kind of diet, specifically gluten-free, casein-free. Are there foods that should be avoided to maximise TEKNON's benefits?
Yes, and I love the fact that you asked this question.
Okay.
You have to realize that because autism primarily falls under the metabolic disorder category, everything that is unhealthy for somebody who's metabolically challenged, which is sugar, simple carbs, gluten, MSG, all of those things you want to limit as much as possible.
Okay.
And you want to, with autistic children, as every parent knows, a lot of times they're choosy about what foods they're willing to eat or drink. Okay, so you have to obviously provide them with nutrition. The one thing TEKNON does is if you can be creative, you have to be creative to get them to take it. Okay, it provides a broad spectrum of the critical and essential nutrients that the body needs.
Right.
So it helps you out on those things. But absolutely, you want to avoid gluten, sugar as much as you can, and simple carbs.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Next question. What is the best time of day to give TEKNON for maximum absorption and effectiveness? And should it be taken with meals or on an empty stomach?
Okay, I'll answer the first one in terms of when it should be taken this way. Your body utilizes or absorbs or evacuates the majority of the vitamins and minerals it takes in every day, every 12 to 16 hours. Okay? And you want to be effective, as effective as possible. You want to try to have the body have those essential nutrients that it needs, okay, during all 24 hours. So here's what we recommend. The ideal time for them to take it in the mornings is between 7 and 8 a.m.
Okay.
And at night, between 7 and 8 p.m.
Okay.
So you get your 12-hour window in there. And also remember this, a night is really important because the body repairs itself when it's at rest.
And so for parents who are giving it just once a day, would you recommend a morning dose or an evening dose?
I'd recommend the evening dose.
Okay, good to know. All right. Next question. Can TEKNON be frozen for long-term storage without affecting its potency? And what are the best practices for keeping it fresh?
Can it be frozen? Yes. Okay. If after it's mixed, don't stick the box of TEKNON in the freezer. Okay.
Right.
But after you've mixed it in a shaker, you could stick it in the refrigerator, but you have to use it within 24 hours. Okay.
Okay.
If you freeze it, I'm talking about just sticking it in the refrigerator.
Yeah.
But after you freeze it, it has to be utilized within 6 weeks.
In 6 weeks.
But it will maintain its potency. It doesn't degrade in any way if it's frozen after you've mixed it.
Okay.
But it has to be utilized within 6 weeks.
And then thawing that, you take it out of the freezer, you put it in the fridge and let it defrost in the fridge until it's completely defrosted.
In less than 6 weeks.
In less than 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Mixing with food. Now, I think you're probably aware, John, some parents struggle to get their child to even take TEKNON. Is it okay to mix it with fruit or yogurt, mix it into a smoothie? Are there any ingredients that we should be avoiding? I think you're going to say sugar, but are there any other ingredients that we should be avoiding when we're mixing it?
Yeah, sugar's always the case.
Yeah.
Okay, but we all should be avoiding sugar. The ingredients you should avoid are simple carbohydrates, okay, fat, and sugar.
Okay.
All right. Now, to mix it into a smoothie, absolutely. The four main berries, such as raspberries, strawberries, blueberries, and blackberries, those are actually very beneficial to the gut bacteria in our microbiome.
Right.
So, I mean, I have parents that mix it with plain, unsweetened yogurt.
Yeah.
Okay, because the child will eat it.
Yeah.
So, yes, you can do that.
Okay, great. So when you're mixing the smoothie, I understand then that you need to make the smoothie first and then take the TEKNON sachet and mix it after with a plastic spoon or a wooden spoon. Is that right? You can't actually mix it with the blender.
That is correct, because the blender generates heat, and that when it activates the heat, it damages some of the active nutrients that are in TEKNON.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And then how about administrative methods? Some kids also, certainly at the beginning, even with my children, we found giving with a syringe was a much easier way of getting them used to the dose or the flavour of it in small doses. So is it possible to give with a syringe instead of the shaker for easier administration, or are there concerns with that?
No, not really.
Okay.
Look, the child doesn't benefit if they don't ingest the TEKNON.
Right.
So it behooves the parents to be as creative as they need to be to discover a way that their child will actually take it. The syringe is a great idea, and we actually have several parents that actually utilize that. The important thing is we want it to go through the saliva glands. Okay. That way, what happens is it gets absorbed into the actives get absorbed into the bloodstream prior to hitting the acid in the gut. Every autistic person has a disrupted gut, okay, and they don't absorb nutrients very well.
Right.
So it's very important that you get it to go down through the saliva glands. The syringe is a brilliant idea.
And do you know of any other creative methods that some parents have adopted to get their children to take it?
Yes, but every parent has to do what is required for their own child.
Okay.
The ones that most of them do is they use a syringe or they mix it in with non-fat, unsweetened, plain yogurt.
Yeah.
And that's fairly effective. I even have one parent that bought this little handheld machine that she puts it in capsules because he'll take a capsule, but he won't drink fluid.
Oh, fascinating!
So,
wow.
But a lot of effort on the mother's part, but that's what it took.
Yeah.
And her child responded wonderfully.
And that was the powder or the liquid?
She took the powder,
Right.
okay, and put them in capsules for the amount. This kid's taking like 8 capsules a day, or morning and night. Yeah. But he would take the capsules, and they're in veggie caps, that dissolve really quickly, and then he'd drink water.
Fantastic.
They dissolve together.
Love it. Love it. And then what about taking it with things like honey or caffeinated drinks? Does that affect the effectiveness in any way?
Yeah, you absolutely don't want to use caffeinated drinks.
Okay.
Caffeine has a direct effect on some of the major symptoms of autism.
Okay.
Because it enhances the disruptive signals that go to the brain.
Right.
In terms of their actions and so on. The only thing I would really be careful of is mixing it with a caffeinated drink.
Okay. All right. So my little dark chocolate chaser for the kids is acceptable.
It is. I would be a little, unless chocolate is the only thing that
it was dark chocolate.
To take. Okay.
Yeah.
Chocolate has
caffeine.
oxalates in it.
Yeah.
So if you can use carob flavor or something like that instead of chocolate, you'll be ahead.
Oh, I like that. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And then I, along with a lot of other parents, we worry about the dependency of TEKNON because you've been very clear in saying once you start, if you stop, the child will regress. Yeah. How do you guarantee the availability of TEKNON to parents like us, who, particularly where we're seeing great progress and we are convinced that this is the right thing for our child?
Well, first of all, you're asking me a very difficult question because it's tough to guarantee something way in the future, but I'll answer it as best I can. First of all, the parent should plan ahead. We typically recommend that because this is a metabolic disorder, and every 90 days the body goes through a resetting pattern. Okay. So what you really should do is always have 90 days worth of product in your house, which is 8 boxes. Right. That protects you for in the future as best I can help you plan, because our production cycles, unless there's some ingredient that gets back ordered and we can't plan for an event. I mean, we have 2 ingredients that are really very long term, like 9-month long term, to purchase and get them into our inventory. Okay. So we buy those. Some of my ingredients I buy 2 years out.
Right.
Okay. I mean, for example, the ingredient that regenerates the mitochondria. Every autistic person has a degraded mitochondria.
Right.
Okay, I buy the one place in the world that this is grown. It's a plant, and it's the only clinically proven one that actually regenerates mitochondria. I buy everything this farm in Japan produces every year.
Wow.
I order it in advance, pay for it in advance, and get it as through the 3 crop cycles,
Wow.
and bring it in. So the only way, really the best way, is as a parent,
Yeah.
plan ahead. Make sure you always have 8 boxes,
Yeah.
on your shelf in the house, and most likely we won't run out unless there's some extraordinary event that happens. In terms of guaranteeing it, my whole company, Pure Life Health Sciences Group, we're dedicated to autism. TEKNON is our primary method of contributing to the world of autism. So we would have to go out of business
Right.
for it not to be available. Or some ingredient just becomes impossible to get, which we would then obviously try to
Find an alternative.
compensate and change to something else. But remember this about taking it, though. Anybody, anytime in the world that you go on a medication, whether it's for high blood pressure or diabetes or high cholesterol, once you go on the medication, it's long term.
Yeah.
You just have to realize we haven't discovered a way of curing autism. We
Right.
just can mitigate the symptoms and help the family and the parents manage it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But once you're on it, it's probably going to be long term. What we found is typically that when the child goes off of it, or an adult, when they go off of it, the symptoms start returning in about 5 days.
Okay.
The problem with that is once the symptoms start returning, it takes longer to get them back to where they were before than it did with the initial startup of the program.
Right.
You're not going to like what you'll go through if you
Yes.
actually go off of it for that
Right.
reason.
Right. Okay. Clear. Now, speaking of symptoms, typically how long does it take for TEKNON to start showing that it's settling gut issues in children that have microbiome issues? And are there stages of improvement?
Absolutely. But the length of time is every child's different. Every person's different. Typically, though, and I can quote you a statistic, 86.2% of all people who go on TEKNON with autism, you'll start seeing an identifiable improvement within 1 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Where you notice where that's happening, and it's all happening in the gut, is their digestive issues will change. If they were constipated, they'll become less constipated. If they had diarrhea, once they go through the detox stage, then the diarrhea their bowel movements will start to normalize. So it gives you a quickly identifiable ways of seeing that their gut is starting to improve. The other thing is calmness. You'll start to see the child becoming calmer.
Absolutely.
Okay, and their sleep patterns will improve.
100%.
Okay, when you see any of those symptoms happen improving, you know that the gut is starting to heal.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah. And that's exactly what we saw. It was within the first 3 weeks we started to see sleep.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that sort of made me realize that, this is actually doing something. So,
What parents have to realize is that you'll know it's going to work if you see even one improvement, because that in any of those areas, or an area that that we haven't even identified, because everybody's body's different.
yes.
But if you see one improvement, it is correctly and positively affecting the gut, and the other symptoms and everything, it will continue to improve with time.
Right. Now, what about things like yeast overgrowth, leaky gut, bacterial imbalances? How does TEKNON support, general gut healing?
Okay, leaky gut, it definitely has a positive impact on that. Bacteria imbalances. If there wasn't a bacteria imbalance, the child wouldn't have autism. What TEKNON does is it helps improve the populations of the beneficial bacteria, and it functions by providing it the proper fiber and so on that it needs to feed on. Okay,
Right.
and it takes away it starves the non-beneficial bacteria that actually causes harms, so that they start to die off. And what it does is it improves the ratios of the good bacteria of the beneficial bacteria to the non-beneficial bacteria.
Right.
And when those go into balance, and I'll give a quick example that I think most people can relate to. There are there are trillions of bacteria in your gut, but some of them really have an impact on us. There are two that everybody in the world has knowledge of, and that's firmicutes and bacteroidetes. All right,
Okay.
These are two major bacteria populations in the gut. And let's say that, and man is meant, a human being is meant to have a 1-to-1 ratio of those two bacteria.
Okay.
Okay, let's say you're balanced and you have a 1-to-1 ratio or something very close to that, but I'm imbalanced
Right.
because the average human being in the world is between 1 and 20 and 1 and 80 instead of 1-to-1. So let's say that I'm 1 and 20 or 1 and 80. You and I sit down and we have a meal. Exactly the same time, exactly the same food, exactly the same quantity. Everything's exactly the same. But you're balanced between those two bacteria populations, and I'm imbalanced.
Right.
Okay, I will extract 40% more calories from that exact same meal than you will. So guess who's going to gain weight? Me.
Wow.
All right. That's just one example that everybody can relate to why it's important to balance the ratios of all these populations. And what we do that is by specifically targeting there's so many of them, we can't do all of them, but we specifically target the really important ones, okay? And try to feed those,
Okay.
what they need, and to starve the non-beneficial or harmful ones.
Interesting. Okay. Now, on the same, there's same food sensitivities and tolerances and that kind of stuff. Does TEKNON help correct food sensitivities over time? And there's specific questions around gluten intolerance. And you mentioned earlier to avoid gluten, but it's very hard to do that.
It is.
So, is there a way that TEKNON can help support that better and sort of supporting and tolerating a wider variety of foods?
It does. It absolutely does help support a wider variety of foods. If you're gluten intolerant, though, you're gluten intolerant. Okay? We can't overcome that. If you're gluten sensitive, then TEKNON is very beneficial.
Interesting.
Okay? If you have a food sensitivity, let's say you're lactose intolerant, you're still lactose intolerant, but TEKNON has an extract from camel milk colostrum,
Right.
as opposed to cow milk colostrum.
Right.
So not all, but almost all people can tolerate TEKNON where they can't tolerate cow milk. Now, if somebody's allergic to camel milk, they're allergic to everything in the camel milk, which includes the extract, the colostrum extract that's in TEKNON. So that's one area where you really can't take it unless what I recommend you do is you start slowly, test them, see if they can tolerate it, gradually increase the dosage until you reach a point where you say, no, this isn't going to work, or yes, this is working. Okay. But remember this, an allergy, yes, we will limit many of the food allergies.
Yes.
But an allergy is where systemically your body is going to revolt against whatever it is that's causing the histamine production. And
Yeah. Okay. What about weaning off? Parents would like to know, if they've been on TEKNON as part of a healing plan for a year, 12 months, 13 months, and they want to just see how the child goes. Do you have a recommended weaning process? Have you seen anybody wean with success?
no.
Okay.
Here's what we've seen is that once you stop, the symptoms will return, regardless of how long you've been on the product. However, your life is much, much, much improved while you're on TEKNON. But the process of weaning off, I go back to the medical field. If you're taking a blood pressure medication and you stop taking that blood pressure medication, what happens? Your blood pressure goes up, you run the risk of having a heart attack and other bad things. Now, they're not going to run the risk of having a heart attack if they wean off of TEKNON, okay?
Right.
But the symptom, for the number of years that we have done our tests and have been treating people, we've never seen anybody who's successfully weaned off. Now, what we have seen is, especially in the ones where the parents are very cognizant of making sure they've got their dietary issues taken care of, meaning they're feeding them a diet that is consistent with, low sugar, low gluten,
Right.
That type of thing. Then they've been able to go on a maintenance dose, which is one per day instead of 2 per day.
Yeah.
We found that virtually everybody has the greatest success when they're on 2 a day and they stay on 2 a day, spread out, that 12 hours
16
approximately. Yeah. And it's in the time that we've actually been fully treating and monitoring people with autism, we've never had a successful person who actually effectively weaned off the product without having the symptoms return.
Right. Interesting. Okay.
I wish I could say different, but I can't.
Yeah, no. It's good to know. It's good to know. Now, what about other neurological conditions? Things like Tourette's, ADHD, speech delay, epilepsy. Are there case studies or evidence supporting TEKNON's efficacy or effectiveness against those neurological conditions?
Okay, we've not done any clinical studies in any of those areas. However, some of the ones you mentioned in our proof of concept studies and actually in the full clinical that we're doing currently, it's included in there. If you have ADHD or ADD, it absolutely will benefit. Tourette's syndrome, I don't have any idea. We've never had anybody, even in one of our studies, or anything anecdotal that's come back to me that indicates that. Epilepsy, absolutely. We didn't do that in our tests, but in our proof of concept study, the one that we did for 6 months, 40% of the patients in the proof of concept study, unknown to us, had epilepsy. And what we've since found out, and the reports came back that the frequency, the severity of the seizures went significantly down, or even stopped. The severity went down and the frequency went down. So then we started monitoring it in our proof of concept studies, the 2 that we did, to make sure that TEKNON worked the way we were wanting it to work. We definitely saw success with ADD, ADHD, and epilepsy. Epilepsy across the board. Tourette's, you don't have. I don't have any information on that.
Interesting. And then what about integration with other therapies? I imagine that it should be used alongside the broader healing program, or is it designed to replace interventions? What about, complementing existing therapies and those kind of things?
Okay, I'm going to answer this one from my heart, okay? And then secondly, from what I've learned scientifically.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in attacking any problem from every angle you can. Be as aggressive as you can safely, to treat it. I'm a firm believer that TEKNON by itself will do miracles for for most autistic people. However, that does not mean that you can't add certain vitamins, let's just say more omega-3s than what we have in TEKNON. All right. If you have any other type of treatment program that you've been doing that has been successful, keep doing it.
Yeah.
Okay. And TEKNON will just help all of that be even better.
Great. And finally, people are curious about the research behind TEKNON, the formulation, the effects. Where can we find credible studies and resources to understand TEKNON's mechanisms better?
You've asked me a very difficult question, okay? Because in the scientific world, it takes 12 lifetimes to get anything into the publication arena. I'm exaggerating, but not much, okay? We've done, since 2015, well, let's put it this way. I've been researching for more than 40 years metabolic health issues,
Yes.
of which autism now we know falls into, which really sped up my learning curve when I went into the autism arena.
Right.
But since 2015, we've researched only autism for all our ingredients and so on. We've done 2 full proof of concept studies. Now, for those of people who don't know what that is, before anybody will go into attempt to market a product, okay, especially in the scientific or medical arena, you have to prove that your concept that it will work is valid, because otherwise, why waste all the time and money and effort and so on? So we did 2 proof of concept studies. However, they have not been published yet because we're doing a backup or an additional full double-blind, placebo-controlled, independent study that's being done at a major university hospital. And they won't, I can't release that information into the public until it's been accepted for publication.
Right.
Okay, so the window, here's where the decision-making process went. The window, I haven't had enough time to get all of those into publications, et cetera. But we made the decision collectively within our organization that if we wait another 3 years, which is how long it's going to take before the clinical study is going to be out and published, how many people will we have not done any good for that we could have helped?
Yeah.
So we made the decision that we would go ahead and introduce it. We'd provide the information that we have, and have people utilize it. They would see for themselves. Look, this isn't something you have to take it for 6 months to know if it's going to help you at all. No. In 1 to 3 weeks, you're going to know. I mean, look, there'll be a few that it takes 6, 8, or 9 weeks, but 86.2% of all the people who try TEKNON, they're going to see an improvement within 1 to 3 weeks, which then identifies for you, I have hope here. Yeah. You know, I have a chance here. Yeah. So in terms of having documentation, we don't have anything because we haven't had the time to get it into the publication. And if you put it out to the world prior to publication, nobody will publish it for you. Right. And here's what a doctor does to us, because in the United States we especially go through practitioners. Okay, here's what they do to me. I'll walk in and say, I've got a great product that I think you might consider recommending to your autistic people. First thing they'll tell me is, well, what clinical studies do you have to back it up? Okay, so I'll go off and I'll tell you what it costs. Each clinical study costs from $2 to $4 million. Okay, and if it's a pharmaceutical, it's $200 million. Wow. But in what we're doing, $2 to $4 million, and takes approximately 2 years. Okay, that's each one. Yeah. Okay, so I go off and I do that because I've done this before. All right, I go off and I do that, and I bring it back to them. Say, here's our clinical studies. Oh no, that's not good enough. I'm going to have to do my own test. Okay, and they'll spend another 6 months to a year doing that. We made the decision within our organization that we can't help anybody unless we can help them help themselves. And so word of mouth, we use practitioners in the United States as well as the autism societies. Yeah. But it's the parents who see the improvements that are proof of concept right now. Now, I can provide information from the proof of concept. I just can't provide all the detailed documentation, or nobody will ever publish me. Right. Got it. Okay. I just haven't had enough time to do all those things. And the major clinical study that is being done right now, and everybody in the Middle East will understand this. We're doing it in Saudi Arabia. Okay. So if I'm telling you it's going to take 18 months to 2 years, that means 3 years. Yeah. Fantastic. But we're doing it as fast as physically possible. Got it. Yeah. Another question, and I've seen this myself, gaining weight. The kids seem to, we've had several parents say that their kids are gaining weight. Now, in some cases that's great because they've been severely underweight. In some cases it's not so great. Have you seen this? Is this a common thing with TEKNON? We have. And there's one very straightforward answer. Yeah. People gain the most weight when they're on non-nutrient dense foods. Yeah. Okay. And because autistic children and people tend to be very selective in what they're willing to eat or drink.
Yeah.
They tend to eat too much. If they're going to eat, they eat too much of the wrong things. So when they go on TEKNON, because it is nutrient dense, the cell structure is getting the nutrients that it needs and it knows it needs, so it absorbs it in and takes it. If they're underweight, they will typically gain weight, but in a healthy way.
Yeah.
If they're already overweight, then some of them will gain some additional weight just because they're still eating what it is they shouldn't be eating, and they're going to eat TEKNON also, which will help their cell structure.
Yeah, we've adjusted some of the foods actually.
Okay, yeah. One thing that people don't really recognize, you know what the number one reason people gain, I'm talking about just a normal person on the street, the number one reason that they gain and maintain too much weight? Lack of proper nutrition at the cellular level.
Okay.
The cell structure is desperate for what it knows it needs.
Right.
So it'll take in anything you give it and hold it.
Okay.
So you just keep gaining weight even though you're not eating proper nutrition.
Wow. And diarrhea, I've had a couple of mums on WhatsApp say to me that their son has had severe diarrhea since starting. And in some cases it was going as long as 6-7 weeks. So they stopped. They couldn't get past that, the very severe diarrhea stage. Typically, how long do you see that last?
It's 3 to 8 weeks. Look, that's a detox phase.
Right.
And the more disrupted the gut is, the microbiome is in the child, the longer the diarrhea stage will happen. But it's strictly a detox stage.
Yeah.
They will get over it once they've cleaned out the majority of the bad bacteria that's in their gut.
Right.
Okay. And look, most people it takes 3 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
We have seen some people where it took 4 months.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, but it's just a stage. What you have to be careful doing that stage, obviously, is dehydration. So you want to make sure they take in plenty of fluids. But it is just a phase or a stage, and they will get over it.
Okay.
It's just everybody's body's different.
Indeed. John, you mentioned the first time we met that you were looking into a neutral flavour profile or potentially other flavours. How is that going? How is that coming along?
We actually have put it in production.
Yay!
Okay, but it's not going to be it won't be ready till probably late May.
Okay, that's good. We'll take it.
And we had a very intelligent person within our group circle of people working in the autism world that did their own informal survey and tell us that the 90% of autistic people like 3 flavors.
Okay.
Strawberry, vanilla, or chocolate.
Yeah.
So we're coming out with some new flavors. They won't be individual containers of the flavors. They will be the flavor itself.
Yeah.
And you just add it into each dosage when you mix it. You just add the flavor in. And so I have that in production also at a flavoring company.
Yeah.
I have to be honest with you. Just before I came to Dubai, I rejected the samples that were sent to me that they'd arrived at that point because I just didn't care for the taste.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we will have that out. We will have that out sometime in 2025.
Yeah.
Where if their child likes strawberry, then they'll buy a neutral flavored, or as neutral as we can make it, TEKNON, and then they can add in the flavor of choice that their child likes. The neutral flavored TEKNON is in production.
Yeah.
The flavoring will go into production as soon as we can approve batches that we like.
Amazing. That is such great news, because a lot of the barrier to entry for a lot of the kids that I know, just in my circle, is that flavour. It's that omega-3 kick at the end that I think a lot of people struggle with. The berry flavour that's there, you get used to that, and the kids now quite enjoy it. But it's that omega kick at the end, I think, that can be a deterrent for lots of kids.
It took us forever to be able to change the formula in a way Because you got to realize if we change the formula, we have to go through all the registration processes all over again. I'm not going to do that.
No.
I mean, that was, like in the UAE, it was a 2-year process.
Yeah.
Okay. We had to work on the omega-3 impact
Yeah.
and still maintain the integrity of the formula.
Yes.
We were able to do that.
Yes.
The plants that are in TEKNON, because it's all plant-derived, can be quite bitter. There's an old saying that if it tastes good, it's bad for you. If it tastes bad, it's good for you. It's true. Okay. So it's really difficult to overcome the bitterness that's in the, which is why we use citrus flavors like the berry flavor.
Yes,
All right.
yeah.
But we've been able to 96% overcome it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and they should be out probably May.
That's
It's in production now.
That's great. I think that's one of the best pieces of news I've heard, and I think it will open TEKNON up to a large number of people that just until now were not able to tolerate it.
I'll tell you what my concern is, but now based on what you just said to me, is that when we bring this out, we'll be out of inventory almost immediately because it'll go. This is the part of the world where, you know, how do you plan for what?
Yeah.
All I would recommend is think about what you need. That's what you probably should order because it'll. I'm afraid you're right, and that it'll go quickly. And to be honest with you, that's what we were being asked for by everybody. So we've done that.
Yeah, good. And then in terms of like the delivery system now, it's a powder that you mix with water or milk or yogurt.
Please,
or
not
whatever.
milk.
Not milk?
No, because milk has 2 poisons in it, that specifically casein.
Yeah.
And because of the disruptive gut that every autistic child has, cow milk itself is really, it's a negative.
Interesting. Because there have been some mums who've asked about milk as a liquid. Not recommended.
No, not at all.
So water or plain yogurt.
Correct.
And what about kefir, like the fermented yogurt drinks?
Okay, it's fantastically healthy for a normal gut.
Yeah.
The problem is it's still milk derived.
Right.
But kefir is a fantastic health product for, you know, the average person,
Yeah.
but not necessarily for an autistic person.
And in terms of yogurt, is there a sort of not cow milk yogurt that you would recommend?
Well, goat milk's always better, but if you use Greek style, non-fat, non-flavored, you know, low sugar yogurt, if you've got to use yogurt, that's what we've had the most success with.
Right. Okay. So then, going back, it's now a powder that you mix with water.
A liquid, yeah.
With a liquid. Have you got plans to see if there's maybe a stable liquid version of it or a tablet version of it, or are we sticking with the powder?
Okay, for right now,
Yeah.
we'll stay with the powder, but I'll explain to you why.
Yeah.
To get a shelf-stable liquid version, the ingredients they use to make it shelf-stable is horrific for the average person, even if you don't have a disrupted gut, such as an autistic person has. So that's out from that standpoint. To make a tablet form, to make a tablet and put it in the form, you have to put it under intense heat. And it runs the actives in the TEKNON.
Interesting. Okay. So powder and liquid it is.
And also, we want it to go through the saliva glands.
Saliva
And you got
glands.
3 sets of saliva glands. We want it to contact all of them in a liquid form so it gets absorbed.
Yes. Okay. All right. Another question. What made you choose this as a career?
You mean science or medicine or autism or all
So
three?
science and then medicine and then the shift from general metabolic disorders into autism.
It's pretty straightforward. My mother and 2 of my sisters were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes
Okay.
40-some years ago. I was the CEO of a company in Australia, and we did business worldwide. And in my mother's case, it was quite severe. So I sold my company, and I decided I was going to dedicate my resources, both time and financially, to trying to figure out a way to help my mother and my sisters. But thinking also probably I'm going to be next. Okay, all right. Now, to be honest with you, when I started, I thought, well, I have a lot of contacts in the medical world. I'll spend 5 or 6 months, spend a couple $100,000, and I'll figure out the solution to this. Well, I didn't.
Right.
It was much more complex and difficult than I thought it was. But I was able to get to the point where neither my 2 sisters nor my mother are diabetic. They're not clinically diabetic now. Anybody who's a diabetic, there's a program that we can put them on, and if they follow it, in 8 weeks they will not be a clinical diabetic. And I found out about autism. I knew what autism was, but I didn't know. But I was speaking at a conference in New York, the C3 U.S. Arab Healthcare Summit, and some people in the audience that listened to my presentation on metabolic syndrome came up to talk to me afterwards, and they said that they were from the University of Wisconsin, and they were looking to develop a blood test that would be highly accurate and could be done at a very early age to detect autism. Because now they just have this CARS scoring test. They do it at 5 or 6 years of age, typically, and that type of thing. So through them, I got an understanding of what autism really was and how it really affected the families. And then through a friend of a friend, I was asked to speak at a conference or a autism center in California. And I met a young man and a family that completely changed my world. And when I realized that this young man, he knew something was wrong with him, he just couldn't do anything about it. But he was desperate, and that desperation really touched me.
Yeah.
So when at the end of my encounter with Ethan, I didn't walk into the autism world. I ran into it. And from that day on, I met with all my scientists and everybody at my organization, said we're going to dedicate all our research from this day on to autism. And but God leads you down an amazing path sometimes. I just spent 40 some years in metabolic health issues, and come to find out that autism is primarily a metabolic health issue. I was able to shortcut all of the research time that it took to come up with something that would be effective. Now, have I been good enough to figure out how to cure it? No. But we have definitely, with TEKNON, gotten to the point that for the majority of people who have autism, we can significantly help their life, their lifestyle, and their family's life.
I agree with that.
So I did it to help my family originally, and then learned through a young man that there's more things to life than dedicating it to help some people who are in need.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, John. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.